My guest today is Diane Pienta, a creativity mentor, healer, forest therapy guide, and author. As a former businesswoman, she was sparked by a cancer diagnosis to transform her life and explore alternative healing, herbalism, yoga, and meditation, leading to a new career in non-traditional ways of finding joy, inner peace, and creativity. In today's episode, we talk about her book, Be the Magic, Bite-Sized Nuggets of Wisdom to feed your joy, nourish your soul, and open your heart. Welcome to Lifeology.
Thanks so much, James, for having me. And thanks for what you're doing in the world, spreading this positivity. It's great.
I really appreciate that. I was, when I was reading the information that was sent to me, I was like, what in the world is, you were talking about the nature, what in the world is a forest therapy guide?
Oh, right. So many people ask me that.
I'm sure.
So it's actually this burgeoning kind of thing that it's, a lot of times we go into nature. Nature is so healing. There's so many studies. We know that it's good for us, but so many times we go in and we're so much in our head, right? Like, so how many times have we taken a walk and we come out of it and to remember any tree, stone, we're just kind of rolling around of what's, what happened yesterday or what do I have to worry about tomorrow? But there's so much magic that can happen. And just taking a walk in nature is great. If you just do that, it's terrific. But a forest therapy guide will bring people together in community and lead people in a series of invitations of really getting into your body, like really experiencing nature through all of your senses in this very embodied way. And it can take us into what we call the liminal state. So you're not in your everyday mind, but you're also not in your, kind of tranced out either. You're present, but you're also like hyper aware of everything that's going on. And the beautiful part is that you're also in community. So you're experiencing it on your own, but then you're coming together and you're sharing. And if you want, there's no requirement for that, but it's so rich. And a lot of people say, why do you need a therapy guide to do that, forest therapy guide to do that? But it's the same thing of doing yoga. Like if you can do yoga on your own, or you could do it in a class. And a lot of times there's that energy field that gets, that gets generated.
That's really interesting. I really like the fact that you're able to do that. One thing I always teach as well is I always tell people to go on a mindful walk. So a mindful walk is this form of mindfulness, of course. And so I have them really be mindful of their five senses. So to get out of their head. And so speak aloud. What do I see? So if I'm going on a walk, I see this tree, I see this leaf, I see this water. And so really practice each of the five senses as you experience it. And then find that moment of stillness to try and experience it all at once. So after you practice each of the five senses and then incorporate that together in harmony and sit with that and really lose yourself in that, in the bliss, I suppose, of nature. So it's really cool. We do the same thing and are different, but the same thing, the same concept. So it's really cool. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I love that. Great.
Now tell me about this. So you unfortunately had a cancer scare. Walk me through that. So you were a former business person, you were successful with that, and then you had the scare. What happened?
Yeah, I was on kind of this traditional business path, and it was going well. It was, it was quote unquote successful, but I always felt like there was something missing to it. Like there was always something like, is this really what my soul is here to serve forward in the world? And but I kept chugging along as we often do. And in my early 30s, I had a cancer diagnosis, and it was this, it was this great wake up call because it actually led me to really ask these questions. What is my soul here to do? What's my purpose? What do I love? Like, what do I really love? And what do I want to do? And so I continued in business, but I also really made sure that I was like feeding my joy and exploring all kinds of healing modalities and things that I love. And I think that's important because, a lot of times we think that we have to kind of like shift our life completely, immediately, everything. But we can actually just kind of incorporate these things into our everyday life and then see where that leads us, where the breadcrumbs lead us. And fast forward about a decade later, and I had this, I was dealing with parents who were, I call them the dying dementia and death, dying, and dementia years. And maybe a lot of people have experienced that too. Yeah. And so after that, along with a lot of business stress, I had adrenal burnout. And it was at that point that I just said, you know what, I'm going to just take this time for me and explore all the things that make people thrive. What do people thrive? And so that really led me on this whole wonderful wild ride that I've been lucky to be on.
Wow. Congratulations. What inspired you to write the book, Be the Magic, Bite-Sized Nuggets of Wisdom to feed your joy, nourish your soul, and open your heart?
Well, along that exploration, I kept getting this. What I really found was that the universe is constantly sending us signals and guidance, and sometimes they're in
Yeah.
the form of like these bricks over the head that to lead us to our joy. It's not all rainbows and unicorns.
It's
Sometimes it's
not.
like the challenging piece that
Yeah.
we later say, "Oh, that was just nudging me in a different direction." But
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have these blinders that we have on, and so. The book is about how to take off the blinders. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but whenever I always would get the exact wisdom from teachers or maybe random strangers or whoever, exactly
Mm-hmm.
when I needed it, like really exactly when I needed it. And I
Mm-hmm.
kept a journal of those quotes. And I started getting a little knocking from my soul that said, all right, this is helpful for you, Diane. It's helpful for other people. And so I
Yeah.
weave in my own story. And, sometimes it's not always pretty. It's human, right? So it's,
Mm-hmm.
the challenges as well as, the beauty. And so, that if when we take off the blinders, that's when we actually can see what's beautiful in the world, but also we can
Mm.
really start to access our own gifts and what we're here to serve forward. It's not just about it is about what brings us joy, but it's also about really unlocking our own magic so that we can serve that forward in the
Mm-hmm.
world. Because that's really, the happiest people are doing
Yeah.
what is meaningful to them. They're leading a purposeful life. And so I
Huh?
really, I'm all about helping people see their light and then serving it forward in the world.
Yeah. What do you mean by blinders? So I have an idea what that means, but what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, they can take a lot of different forms. I mean, most often they take the form of rumination or worry. It's the habitual patterns that we have that keep us from that keep us from really moving forward. I'll give an example.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in business and I was starting to do yoga, and this was 20 something years ago, and a bunch of people were going to go and do yoga teacher training. It was the 6 week thing, and I thought, oh, I would love to do that. And then I immediately, like all the reasons that I couldn't do that, and didn't do that, came about. And so it's those blinders that, of
Yeah.
why, and it kind of keeps us very narrow versus like having this really expanded perspective, an expanded point of
Mm-hmm.
view, an expanded sense of what's possible. And so that gives a little sense of what the blinders are. And when
Yeah.
we remove them, right, then all of a sudden so much is possible that didn't seem possible before.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I mean, I think that is something where we do become very limited. We're taught to, we have so many routines, so many things in life. And so we just do it by rote and we don't really realize that things can be different. So if we want something different, we have to look at things different. We have to do something different. I always tell people just in something as simple as sit in a different place in your house. If you're trying to work through something and you're always sitting in the same place, well, sit in a different spot because you're literally seeing the world in a different way. And so those small little micro movements allow people to experience life in a different way. Now, I want to transition into the word magic. That has different meanings for different people. What does that word specifically mean for you and for this book?
Yeah, I would say, magic for me is about having this like really deep peace and contentedness in our heart. And
Mm,
it's,
yeah.
so it's also seeing, there's a sense of wonder and awe that most of us had, I would say maybe all of us had as kids, and kids still have. It's that sense of wonder and what's
Yeah.
beautiful and what's possible. And, when you look around, we live on an incredibly beautiful planet, but how often do we really see all of that
Hmm.
magic that's coming to us? And I would also say that we all come with our own unique brand of magic. It's different from
Hmm.
everybody else. And
Yeah.
when we can access that, I mean, it's that special gift. It's those special strengths, the combination of our strengths that combine with our life experience,
Hmm.
that just allow us to do what we're supposed to be doing in a very unique way. And so when we can tap into that makes life just a lot more fun.
Yeah.
And just that
It
sense
does.
of play and curiosity. I think we've lost the sense of play. For many adults, we've lost a sense of play. And so the
Yeah.
idea is like, how do we get back? Like, play is the highest form of learning. So there's so many different practices that we can do that, just think about what you loved to do when you were little, like when you were 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, that you did naturally.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then see, okay, like how much are you actually doing that? I remember when somebody asked me that, and this was
That's
a
fair.
while ago, and I was like, oh, I used to climb trees. I mean, I was always in the trees. And then, I wrote letters. I loved to play music. I loved to
Yeah,
dance. And I was like, how much am I actually doing that now? And
that's
so,
fair.
when we could see that, that can guide our way in.
Yeah.
Another thing that I write about in the book is it's a little vignette called "Jealousy is a Great Informer," and it actually talks about
Huh.
that yoga experience where I thought, oh, I didn't go to yoga, but then what I started doing, and this is really something for people to think about. I I would start to critique other teachers' classes, and I would say,
Oh,
"Oh,
interesting.
I could have taught a better class than that." But the truth is, no one would know that, including me, because they were
That's
out there doing it and
fair.
I wasn't doing it, right? So I think
That's fair.
when we start to like look and see, oh, what, and I think that's important
Yeah.
even for when our naysayers come in, like, right, if we're not pursuing our own joy, we can't
Hmm.
actually really cheerlead somebody else's joy. So as
Yeah.
you're kind of on your path, keep that in mind.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I really appreciate that. You also talk about 8 ways to find happiness by finding your strength. I'm looking through some things that you had sent me. And I'm like, oh, I want to ask all these questions. So,
Yeah.
what are these 8 ways to find happiness?
Yeah. Well, I'll actually get the book out, but
Yeah.
I wrote a vignette about a woman in North Carolina who was at the folk school, and she was going through a really acrimonious divorce, like really just a tough time. And she got a court date that was like 6 months out. And she was like, oh, the idea of sitting and waiting for this just was, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
just not tenable. And so on a whim, she
Yeah.
packed up her camper van. She didn't tell anybody, including her grown kids, where she was going. And she went to the John C. Campbell Folk School, and she went into the blacksmithing studio literally for 6 months.
Oh,
And so,
wow.
when I look at how she kind of overcame this difficulty, because I think happiness is this. A lot of times people think, oh, when the divorce goes through, then I'll be happy. When this happens, then I'll be
Hmm.
happy. But how do we cultivate it actually in the midst of, all these things are happening, and how can I actually be happy? So, one of the things is to do something creative every single day, even if it's
Yeah.
find something, whatever that is for you. Maybe for you that's podcasting, or if you're not doing
Hmm.
something creative, just identify something. And if you don't know, then try something. If you don't like it, do something
Yeah.
else. So
Yeah.
being
That's fair.
creative, yeah, doing something with your hands.
Yeah.
Our ancestors all made everything, but we're so divorced from that. And so really getting back in and
That's true.
doing,
Yeah.
like doing something with
Yeah.
our hands
One of
has
my
this really tangible. Go
yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is the last person in the race beats the person on the couch. So that was really, it's kind of symbolic with what we're saying here in the sense of do something different every single day. In fact, was it Eleanor Roosevelt who said, do something every day do something every day that brings you fear. Like, I did say that right.
Yeah. That
Basically,
scares
it's
you.
overcoming
Yeah.
fear. Do something, yeah, that scares you. Yeah. So to overcome that. And so, I mean, obviously a brilliant woman, but it's such a great, it's something great because you're constantly moving and growing and evolving and stretching and becoming a person that you were destined to be, as opposed to,
Yeah.
a lot of times circumstances will just cause us to stay where we are. So last person in the race beats the person on the couch.
I love
So
that.
what's your
And I
second?
love,
Give me another version of that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I love what you were saying earlier too about interrupt the pattern, because I actually read another vignette
Hmm.
about that talks about
Oh,
like really play the game, interrupt the pattern, and look at all the ways. Like
yeah.
how do you usually walk to your coffee shop? Maybe try a different coffee shop.
Fair.
How do you write? Try just writing for 10 minutes with your non-dominant hand.
Yeah.
Play with it and see
Yeah.
what other ways can you shift. And there's a million ways. What hand do you use to open the refrigerator? Try a different hand. And so all these things can help
Mm,
us shift our brains actually start to work in different ways. And it's one of the reasons we love
yeah.
travel so much, because we're getting all this new sensory
Yeah.
information and we're processing it. So we could
Yeah.
live our lives like we're maybe on vacation, and oh, let's try a different
That's great.
restaurant. Let's
Yeah.
try a
Yeah.
different
Exactly.
restaurant
I
instead of
know.
the usual.
from a psychological approach, if you actually use your non-dominant hand when you're journaling, you actually access a different part of your brain, a different side of your brain. And so for elementary versions of that, left side is creative, left side is logical, right side is creative. So if you write with a different side, you're going to think it slightly different. So it's not about how legible your handwriting is, but it's about, as you write, you'll start to experience a different emotional pattern based off of what you're thinking about. So if you're journaling and you usually write with one hand, I'm left-handed, so I write this way. But if I'm working through something, I will write with my right hand. And I may not be able to read it later, but it allows me to really be able to access different parts that may not be my default version of it. So that's something, from a psychological approach, I highly endorse that as well.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you say, because I've always been amazed at what comes through on my non-dominant hand. I'm like, who are you? What just came through?
That's funny.
Just some good wisdom. Yeah.
From a physiological approach too. And because I did yoga for years, I'm not a teacher like you, but that was one thing that I always practiced. So it's like, if I cross my arms, I make sure that I cross them the other way too. And so it feels different, but it also, I realize, doing it this way for so long as a kid, the way my shoulders automatically move, but this way, for those who can't see me, I'm crossing my arms and I'm switching the sides. But that is something where, to practice that. Or if I usually, when I walk, I walk with my right foot first. So sometimes I try and go with my left foot. And so it's something just to be as symmetrical as possible in one's life is, just like you're saying, to do things in a different way than you typically do, because it allows you to be a much more well-rounded person, a much more mobile person, for lack of better words.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying too, because it's all about moving your body, right? So like where your body goes, your mind will follow. So if you are like, just kind of hunched over, I mean, that sends a message to your brain that, oh, things are not so great, but you can shift out. I mean, really, like, shifting into happiness is shifting our energy. So we can literally, like, if you put your hand up, so for those of you who can't see me, I'm raising my hands up above my head. And that, it's very hard. One time I was having an argument with my husband, and so I just started doing this, and it was just impossible to keep it going. I just kind of, fell down laughing instead. And
That's
so,
funny.
even like our habitual ways of interacting with people and speaking are locked in our body. So when we can unlock our body, it's one of the ways, like dancing, if you like to dance, is just a great way to move. But there's, however you like to move, just move your body, move the energy out and into different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. We only have a few more minutes, and for those of you, when you purchase this book, you'll read all the different vignettes in the 8 ways to find happiness by finding your strength. But I wanted what's the mission of this book? What are you hoping to accomplish when people read it?
Yeah, when I was looking at that, I thought, as writers, we often, like, we write because we have a story inside of us, and then we start to think, okay, what is my goal with this? And my goal is for people to find a sense of belonging to themselves and a sense of peace. And right now, something like 1 out of every 2 people say that they're lonely, say that they don't feel like they belong, that there's a disconnectedness. That's epidemic portion. And when we can access, and do these practices in a way that is playful yet potent, it brings us back to ourselves, and it brings us back to our joy and what I keep saying, what we came here to do. Because that, once we have that, that really informs our relationships, our community. And that's another informer of having a really rich, happy life. It really informs how we move in the world. It informs our confidence. And so, one of the things I said is I'm liking scattering seeds of peace with this book. And I like that it's playful. Right now, I think we have so much coming in with so much media and so much distraction. So I wrote the book in a way that you could literally just open to any page, read a vignette. You don't have to read it straight through. And I like to say, just pick it up and say, what piece of wisdom wants to connect with me today? Oh, I do that too. And I think, oh, it's exactly what I needed.
Now, does it have to be read front to back, or can you read it, just pick and choose whatever you want?
Yeah, the vignettes are short, so they're maybe 3 or 4 pages long, and you literally can just open to a page like a tarot deck, just open to any page and see which wisdom wants to connect with you. Yeah, so it's an easy read that way. I also think that,
Yeah, that's perfect.
one of the things I would say to people is that reading, and I think we all know this, but reading something, we say, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good idea. But actually putting them into practice gets them, like,
Yes.
embodies the positive rituals. So encourage you to pick something that actually sparks your interest. No shoulds here. So if you're like, oh, I should do that, no, discard that and pick
Mm.
something that is like, oh, I think I want to do that. And then commit to it for a while and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, on average, it takes 66 times for people to do something to become a habit. So it may sound like a lot, but it's really not, because we do those things all the time. And so 66 times can be like within a couple of days. But the point
Right.
is that just trying something. I always tell people, it's, if you want to try something new, focus simply on standing up. Because as humans, we like to be as sedentary as possible. So instead of the whole process of people saying, I want to go for a walk or I want to do this or that, instead of thinking about the whole event, just simply say, let me just focus on standing up from wherever I'm sitting. Because once you stand up, you're committed. That's energy that you've used. And now you have, as soon as you stand, it creates more energy. And then you need to do something with that energy. So just really focus on the first 20 seconds of any event. You'll bypass that. And then that'll launch you to be able to do whatever else you need to do.
That is so brilliant. And, in positive psychology, we have one quote that says, just do one dish. Like, just go to the sink and do one dish. And it's that action of, and also getting in the elements of water. So I love what you're saying. Just stand up, and it says to your whole body that, okay, we're doing something different now.
Yeah,
And
it's true.
yeah. Yeah. I write a little vignette about that too, called The Hardest Part is Getting Started. And for a lot of people, it is, like actually taking that step. And so, and breaking it down into little pieces. A lot of times we think that we have to, I really want to change so much about my life. But, you could look and say, what would make my life 2% better today, or 5% better? And then just make a list of, 20 things that you love to do. And then when you find yourself stuck, just have your list near you and say, oh, yeah, I forgot that I love to do X. I play the fiddle. And I also, I always say, oh my gosh, who has time to play the fiddle? I'm so busy. But it's hanging on my wall. And I remember sometimes just playing literally for 3 minutes, literally like 3 minutes a day, shifts me. I can't be unhappy and doing that at the same time. So like fear and love cannot exist at the same time. So, and when we do what we love, we're filled with love. It actually brings in the energy and the quality of love and the quality of play. And those are energies. So when we're actually like calling those in, then we're filled with them. And then that gives us a different energy to think more creative thoughts, to be in an expanded viewpoint, a perspective, gives us creative solutions. Yeah. And it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun. Well, on that note, we'll unfortunately have to end our session today. So if my viewers and listeners want to find out more information about you, Diane, and to purchase your book, Be the Magic, Bite-Sized Nuggets of Wisdom to Feed Your Joy, Nourish Your Soul, and Open Your Heart, where will they find this information online?
Yeah, you can go to my website. It's Diane Pienta. I'll spell that, DianePienta.com. And there's links there. You can find it on Amazon, all of the online channels. And I also say I'm a big fan of independent bookstores. So you could always ask your independent bookstore to order you one if they don't already have it in stock. And you could also find me on Instagram, Diane Pienta Magic.
Wonderful. My viewers and listeners also know that if you can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmillerlifeology.com, and I'll link you with Diane Pienta and her book, Be the Magic, Bite-Sized Nuggets of Wisdom to feed your joy, nourish your soul, and open your heart. Thank you so much for being a wonderful guest today.
Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.